to to where we read about the epic of Yosef and his brothers. And this is a story that can be read on many, many levels. And we have within the Torah some very, very vivid details where we have descriptions of the inner strengths and the weaknesses of particular members of the clan of Yaakov. And we also can't forget that this is a family that is somewhat fragmented, that is at odds with each other, but the future of the Jewish people lie in the balance. The story does conclude with them in a state of union, but it took a bit of time and effort to actually achieve this. And the interactions and the course of events that follow because of the discord will ultimately lead to the slavery in Egypt, as well as the transformation of Am Yisrael, the clan, the family of Yaakov, becoming the Jewish nation. So in this class today, we're going to be focusing on the multiple meanings that perhaps could be contained in Yosef's very, very famous dreams. And through this analysis, we're hopefully going to perhaps come to some understanding of the personality of Yosef, particularly as a youth, and we'll also perhaps be able to uncover some of the family dynamics from some of the family politics as well. So let's begin. We're going to take a look at source number one. We know that the brothers, we know that the brothers are at odds with Yosef. And we also know the reason why, because it's very, very clearly spelt out for us within the Torah itself. Source number one, it says, Vayiru echav ki oso ohav avihem mikol echav, vayisneu oso v'lo yochlu dabro l'shalom. The brothers saw that their father loved Yosef more than any of the other brothers, and as a result of this, they hated him so much they couldn't even speak to him in a peaceful manner. Yosef, we read about, is given a very special coat. This is a coat that they tear away from him when they finally sort of conspire to at first murder him and then sell him into slavery. And they know that he is the favorite. And the brothers are offended, they're hurt, they're bothered by the fact that their father so openly loves their brother more than the rest. Now, it's understandable. We kind of understand. We know why their father loves him more than the rest. He was, after all, the firstborn son of Rachel, his most beloved wife. But still, at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily diminish the hurt that the other children feel. Now, all the classic commentators, they all sort of very, very much at great length discuss Yosef's personality. They pay attention to the minutiae. They look at the additional words, or the unusual phrases or statements, or the emphasized, oh, Marilyn, it's so good to see you.
Marilyn. Yes. It's good to see you, Marilyn.
Thank you. I was held up.
One of the interesting things that Rashi points out is the word na'ar is used with regards to Yosef over and over again. And Rashi understands this to mean that he's a youth. He's I think we might be out of the handouts. We might have to share.
I can make coffee.
Okay.
Here.
Right, so the fact that he's a youth means he's preoccupied with his appearance. He's always looking in the mirror. He's always combing his hair. He's always making sure that his eyelashes are always set correctly. Others all see that Yosef sort of contains a certain amount of naivete. He fails to understand that he can't act in a very high-handed manner without arousing the hatred of his brothers. He's immature and he's untestamentalized. This is what the Sforno says. Some, like for example, Rav Shamshon Rafal Hirsch, understand him to be victimized as a young child by the children of Leah. So we see that there's already that familial friction that's sort of built into the system. Others suggest that Yaakov used him as a director of the family's sheep business. We know, for example, that Yaakov sends Yosef to go and check in on his brothers to see how things are going. He's called a Ben Zakunim because in his old age he turned to Yosef to help him run the business. But this also arouses jealousy. This arouses suspicion. The Abarbanel actually points out something quite interesting. We know that, for example, within the Abrahamic line, in every previous generation, there was always somebody who was rejected from the sort of the train, let's call it. Abraham, for example, had two sons. He had Yitzchak and Yishmael. Yishmael was expelled from the Abrahamic line. He's not the progenitor of the Jewish people. So too also with Yaakov. Yaakov had a brother, Esav. Esav is also ejected from the Abrahamic line. So what the brothers here, at least according to the Barbanel, are concerned about is that Yosef is being primed to be the next progenitor of the Abrahamic line at the expense of all of them. They're to be rejected and kicked sort of out of the family business, the family tradition, like Yishmael, like Esav was. And this induced them to loathe him and feel a great level of jealousy. Now, I've basically sort of compacted and brought about 5 or 6 different commentators, and the truth is that all of them can be true, and probably there is a mosaic here. All these views can be viewed together, and probably they all reflect some aspect and understanding sort of a reality of Yosef and his relationship with his brothers. There's a lot of friction, and there's a lot going on here under the seams. But if we were to examine Yosef's dreams, we would understand Yosef perhaps in the most accurate manner, and perhaps glean a deeper understanding of the familial strife, at least as they seem to be understood from these new explanations, these new understandings of what Yosef dreamt. So, let's talk about dreams and let's talk about Yosef. Dreams play a very, very outsized role in the life of Yosef. A dream always seems to precipitate some kind of massive change within Yosef's life. For example, his ability to decode dreams was ultimately what led him to be introduced to Paro. Dreams enabled him to be able to become the viceroy, to become the prime minister. Dreams took him out of prison. Dreams here also precipitate the strife between his family. We know, for example, that because of his ability and his relationship with dreams, that his brothers held a particular vehemence and dislike for him. But let's take a look at source number 2, because we can see that dreams play an outsized role in their desire to harm him. Source number 2, Vayiru oso merochav. He's been sent by his father, Yosef. He's been sent by his father to... He was sent by his father to go check in on his brothers. He drew close to them. And they conspired to kill him. The brothers see him from afar and to say, okay, we're going to kill this guy. What did they say to each other? Well, one said to the other, the dreamer is coming. Let's kill him. We can send him into one of the pits. We can say that a wild animal harmed him. V'nira mayu chalomosav, and we will see what will become of his dreams. So we see that in their hatred of, Yosef, the dreams are what they focus in on. Here comes the dreamer. Let's kill him. Let's see what happens with his dreams. Why are these dreams so dangerous? Why are they so blasphemous? Why are they so problematic? Why is it that Yosef's dreams sort of become the prompt that set this whole set of affairs, the whole sort of deck of cards, the whole set of dominoes falling one after the other? What is it about Yosef's dreams that are so significant? So let's examine Yosef's dreams. Source number 3. Vayachalom Yosef chalom vayaged le'achav v'yisifu otzno oso. Yosef had a dream. He told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. Vayomer alehem shimunah chalom hazeh asher chalamti. Listen to this dream that I've dreamt. Hine anachnu ma'alamim alumim b'soch hasodeh. We were sheaving sheaves in the field. V'hine kama alumasi v'gam nitzava. My sheave stood up. V'hine tusuben alumosechem. Your sheaves surrounded mine. And they bow down to my sheaf. That's dream number 1. They're in the field. They're sort of harvesting grain, and their sheaves of grain bow down to his sheaf. His brothers say in response to him, do you mean to rule over us? Do you mean to dominate us? And they added to the hate that they had for him because of his dreams and because of his words. Dream number 2. He had another dream. And he told it again to his brothers. And he said, I had another dream. V'hine hashemesh v'hayoreach ve'achad asar kochavim mishtachavim li. 12 stars, the moon and the sun, they all are bowing down to me. Vayesaper el aviv ve'el achav. He sort of told it over again to his father in front of his brothers after he told it to them. Vayigrabo aviv, and his father yelled at him. Vayomer lo, and he said to him, Ma hachalom hazeh asher chalamta. What is this dream that you've dreamt? Havo navo ani v'imcha ve'achech lihishtachavos l'cho arza. Will it really come to pass that I, your mother, who's already expired at this point, and your brothers will bow down to you? Vayikanu vo echav. His brothers were jealous of him. Aviv shomar satofer. Meanwhile, his father kept the matter in mind. So we have these dreams. Now, what is it about these dreams? Well, these dreams seem to be very concerned with leadership, Yosef's leadership. That's beyond any doubt. In fact, we know that that's the response that the brothers have. Do you mean to reign and dominate over us? We can ask the question, what exactly are these dreams? Are these dreams prophetic in nature? Is this a message from Hashem? Hashem is communicating to Yosef, this is what is coming to pass? Or perhaps these dreams are a reflection of his own psyche, his personal ambition. They're a reflection of where he sees himself and what he wants for himself. When we examine the dreams, the second one seems much more significant than the first, right? In the first dream, the sheaves are bowing down to the brother. Here it's all symbolic. There's nobody actually present. But in the latter dream, however, things are much more cosmic in their scale. We've moved on from the field of agriculture, food, and material wealth, and now we're looking at things on a much broader scale. The second one seems to be much, much more significant. And in fact, that's what the source number 4 from the Bechor Shor, 12th century commentary to Torah, that's in fact what he says. He says the entire world needs the sun and the moon. And when one sees the sun and the moon bowing down to a person, it indicates that just as the sun and the moon are in need of that person, so they pay homage to him, so the entire world is reliant and dependent on that person. So we see here that there's some very significant imagery playing out. Now, if we understand this to be prophetic or a reflection of his own internal psyche, how we understand these things is going to be affected. If we understand these things to be, or these dreams to be, a reflection of Yosef's own psyche, and these are perhaps not a message from Hashem, this means that his view of himself is very, very inflated. If it's a prophetic vision from God, then this is probably much more significant. We know, for example, that Hashem communicates through dreams. And we're going to now sort of explore the possibility that this was prophetic in nature. You know, all we need to do is just think back to Yaakov, and when he fled his father, when he fled from Esav, and he was running towards Lavan, he has a dream of a ladder and angels ascending and descending the ladder. So we know that God does communicate through dreams. They're not necessarily a reflection of the person's own id or the person's own ego. And when we think about it, to a certain extent, this dream does in fact come true. Let's take a look, for example, in source number 6. Vayosef hu hashalit al haaretz hu hamashber lechol ha'am haaretz vayavo achei Yosef yishtachu v'lo apayim arza. Yosef is the vizier of the land. He's the one who's handing out all the rations to all the people. And what happens? His brothers come down to Eretz Mitzrayim to purchase grain, and they bow down to him. Vayiskar Yosef es hachalomos. Yosef remembered the dream. Vayomer alehem meraglim atem. You are spies. So Yosef here has a dream, and we also see that the dream seems to come true. His brothers are bowing down to him, and also we know about the sheaves. So we see that he's putting himself as a person who is sort of at the center of control of food and wealth, and here it's exactly as things coming to pass. So that would seem to indicate that the dreams are prophetic in nature. However, but it's easy to prove that the opposite is true as well. If you recall, Yosef dreamt, he tells it to his father, and his father sort of yells at him and says, how is this going to come to pass? Your mother is dead. Your mother has passed away. So if it's prophetic, what exactly is going on over here? The dream doesn't seem to be correct. The dream seems to be nonsense. So there are problems. If it's prophetic in nature, there's some things we can say sort of, come true, but other things don't come true. Not all 11 of his brothers actually bow down to him. Only 10 of his brothers bow down to him. Binyamin is never part of the bowing down phenomenon. So you don't have those 11 stars representing the 11 tribes. So if it's prophetic, it doesn't completely come true. Now, Rashi says, well, it's possible that the father that there's always going to be some aspect of every dream that's nonsense. That's just the reality of dreams. Even if they're prophetic in nature, some aspect of them is going to be incorrect. That's not the view of the Ramban. It's not the view of Nachmanides. Let's take a look at source number 9. What do we see there? Vayisaper el aviv eich nisa'acha libucha lacha lemahachalom hazeh. How could you dare dream such a dream? This is but your conceit and an example of youth that you would dream in such matters. They would have this in your heart to dream such a thing. So according to the Ramban, Yosef, or at least according to Yaakov, Yosef's dream was a self-created expression. It was a product of an overinflated ego, an expression of an incredible ambition. So we have two possible ways of understanding the dreams. If they're prophetic in nature, well, we have problems with that because they don't completely come true. If they are simply a reflection of his own ego, well, that also has problems because to a certain extent it does come to pass. So either one of these explanations doesn't completely sit well. And the truth is that none of the explanations that we're going to give two other ways to conceptualize the dreams. But according to either one of these interpretations, they're not perfect. And we never completely resolve any of these questions. Perhaps they're a mixture of both. So let's ask another question. Let's imagine that I had an incredible dream. Let's say I had an arrogant and I have a self-righteous dream. And I tell it to my brother, I tell it to my parents. Are my brothers now going to want to kill me? It's hardly likely. As much as Yosef may be full of himself, as much as Yosef might have been precocious, that wasn't enough of a reason for them to kill him. So there's some point of this story where things transition, where something of greater significance plays out. And so it's possible that the interpretation of Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch adds something to the story that also can reframe the conflict between Yosef and his brothers and Yosef's dream. Let's take a look at source number 10. It's remarkable that he should have dreamt of binding sheaves. That was something which ordinarily they would have no connection with. Why? They're pastoralists. They follow their herds of sheep around. They live a semi-nomadic life. They don't own property. They don't plant crops. They don't harvest. They don't bind sheaves. To become an agricultural people lay in the visions and prophecies of the future. This is their destiny, still that's quite distant and far away. If agriculture was so much in his mind that he even dreamt of it, the brothers were justified in thinking that this could only be due to the teaching and information given to him by his father over the expected national destiny of the house. All the more then, the brothers could believe themselves justified in saying, "Will you reign over us? Do you plan to rule over us even now?" Such a thought shouldn't even be in a dream. So according to Rav Hirsch, the brothers were binding sheaves, and that was bizarre. That's not something that sheep herders normally do. When would we become agriculturalists? That would only be when we establish our own country, our own state, that would be well in the future, according to the promise that Hashem had given Avraham, that was communicated to Yitzchak, was communicated to Yaakov, and finally here to Yosef. And Yosef here is aware, he's conceptualizing that future state, and he's putting himself down, he's nominating himself for a position of national leadership. Now, again, the struggles here are not regular quibbles between family members. It's not like, me and my brothers fighting over who has access to the phones at night and who's going to wash the dishes. This is a family that knows what the future holds for them, and ultimately knows that there will be an Am Yisrael, there will be a nation, there will be a country, and there will be a king. Who's going to be that king? Who's going to be that prime minister? Who's going to be that leader? Yosef was proclaiming himself to be that individual. Yosef is a pretender to the throne. And this is what raises the brothers' ire to the degree that they now want to kill him. And I've been giving these series of classes on Wednesday night on Hasidic succession. When it comes to power, power struggles bring out the worst in people. They lead to conflict. They sometimes lead to bloodshed. And the fact that it's your family doesn't matter. And the classes I've been giving on Wednesday are perfectly articulate this fact. It makes no difference. When it comes to struggles of power, the worst in people are brought out.
That was in one of the recent Haftorahs where David, the son of King David was usurping the throne, and Bathsheba is like, we got to tell your father about this because we're going to disappear. We're going to be disappeared.
Yeah.
So it's like
two princes.
Yeah.
Why we have so much about Jacob this week, last week, year before, a week before? Why they don't talk? The Torah don't talk like that, but so much about.
So you're right. When it comes to Yitzchak, we don't have as much as Yaakov, but we have almost as much of Avraham as Yaakov. Those two seem to have almost the same amount.
Oh, okay. They're like for 4 weeks already, Yaakov? Wow.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov.
Well, it's not just the Parshas, it's the number of psukim that talk about him.
What's the most psukim in the Torah for anybody?
Moshe.
Oh, wow.
Moshe has the most.
Yeah. I thought it was Abraham.
And I believe Moshe has more. But remember, because you have Shemos through Devarim, right? All the Sfarim, they're all about Moshe, right? Moshe is a player in 4 out of the 5 books of the Torah. Anywho, so that's explanation into understanding number 3. That perhaps it's prophetic, perhaps it's a reflection of his ego. But in any event, even if they're both true, even if one is true, what becomes the catalyst to this to the struggle over here was the pretendership to the throne and the power struggle that now ensues. We're now going to discuss interpretation number 4, and this is where we're going to conclude. It's going to be a long one, though. Yosef perhaps was not just simply an arrogant upstart. Yosef is actually a very talented and capable leader. He has a lot of charisma. He has a lot of charm. And we also know that in terms of administration, he has a lot of efficiency. He appears to have the magic touch. Everything that he touches turns to gold. He is the favorite, for example, in Yaakov's home. No sooner does he arrive as a slave in Egypt, he climbs the ladder and becomes a slave in a prominent Egyptian household and eventually takes over that family's business. He's attractive and attracts the attention of all sorts of people, including women, including his mistress. Ultimately, that brings him to prison. But even in prison, he rises to become the administrator of the jail. Ultimately, because of his charisma, because of his charm, because of his wit, he's introduced to Paro and he's appointed to the viceroy. And all of this is just sort of a mere training for the greatest example of his administrative skills when he takes over and administrates a country in the midst of a famine and is still able to garner increased wealth and power for Paro's household. And he seems to do this with very little effort, with much ease. So we can suggest that his dreams then form another link, not a personal not as an expression of personal ambition, not of ego, not of power, but rather a responsible leadership role. He has a vision for how the Jewish people ought to be, and this precipitates a conflict. One detail in the passage about the dreams that we read was that he dreamt a dream, And the brothers hated him. They hated him even before he told them what the dream was. They hated him because he was a dreamer. Yosef is a man who has a dream. He's a step ahead. He has a vision for the future. He has ideas for how the nation is meant to take shape, and he's, as a result, has a long view of things. Meanwhile, his brothers do not share that long view. They're somewhat myopic. They have a rather short. They're rather short-sighted. They don't share his point of view. And we're going to now take a look at Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik in source number 11. Because we're going to see that perhaps the conflict here was about vision for the Jewish future. What did Yosef seek? To what did he aspire? What foreboding troubled him? The answer is, an obscure feeling of insecurity frightened him. What were the elements of that insecurity? The biblical Yosef was not persuaded that Yaakov dwelt in the land of his father's wanderings would endure for long, which means to say he did not think that the Jewish people would always remain in the land of Canaan, being able to herd sheep and live a segregated life. The words, "Your seed shall be strangers in an alien land," kept tolling in his ears. He saw himself and his brothers in an alien environment, far from the land of Canaan. In his dream, he saw, behold, we're binding sheaves. They're no longer in Canaan. We're in the land of Egypt, where we can no longer be shepherds. We have to be agriculturalists. We are integrated into a new economy with new styles of living, new characteristics, and new laws. Basically, he dreamt of a framework within which the unity of the family could be preserved, even in the far-flung places where Hashem would scatter them. His constant preoccupation was the continuation of Abraham's tradition amidst a new economic structure and civilization. The brothers did not, however, understand him, for they looked upon the future as a continuation of the present. They perceived all problems from within the framework of their life in Canaan, in the traditional surroundings, in the thoroughly familiar habitat of the patriarchs. They did not need new frameworks nor novel economic methods. The biblical Joseph relates, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars are bowing down to me. There is a secular world. There's great and powerful technologies that can create wonders and change the foundations of our lives. Even if this is true, in Canaan we can get along without it, this is not necessarily always going to be the case. We will not always be in Canaan. And this secular culture entails destructive elements with many negative and perverse aspects. We have to relate to it yet. The confrontation will not take place in Canaan, where the tempo of life flows serenely, but in a new land, a new alien land. How Hashem decreed that you will be strangers in a land that's not yours. I fear we will not be able to maintain the separation between us and the surroundings. If we will not be prepared for new conditions, the environment will swallow us. On the other hand, if we think of the future, we can plan. So Rav Soloveitchik describes Yosef as a forward-thinking dreamer, a planner, a man of the future. He's a man who has the ability to intuit future events. He's a decoder. He's able to interpret dreams. And he pictures a future situation where the Jewish separation that existed in Canaan will be challenged, and he wants to plan for it. The brothers, on the other hand, are happy with the status quo. They're happy to continue as shepherds in the land of Canaan. And they say to him, and as we continue within the note, "Why do you meddle in the secrets of Hashem? Why do you get involved in the secret plans of God? We don't have to worry about the future. We'll get by." The brothers disagree with Yosef. They argue with him, and they argue with his ideology. Yosef is planning to change how they practice Judaism to be able to meet the challenges of a new time and a new culture, a new place. And his brothers were resistant to the challenge. There were debates that happened within Yaakov's family, perhaps even passionate debates, with emotions and with emotions ratcheted high, with people with elevated defensiveness. Yosef stands his ground, but the brothers also hate him and resent him for it. You have here a confrontation about how to meet the future. Do we need to change how we observe Judaism? How do we change Judaism that still preserves what it means to be a part of Am Yisrael in the face of the coming Egyptian reality? And do we need to do so at all? In this dispute, in the name of heaven, divine providence decided in favor of Yosef, and the house of Yaakov was saved from destruction only due to Yosef's dreams. Yosef ultimately becomes the fulcrum, he becomes the support for the family. He provides for them materially. He gives them food during the years of famine. He gives them a place where they could shepherd and maintain a certain amount of their cultural distinctiveness in the land of Goshen. But at the same time, he also provided for them a religious template, a way to live their lives as Jews in a non-Jewish world. They couldn't stay in the shtetl anymore. They had to live in Egypt. So Yosef's dreams enabled him to foretell what might happen, and gives him the impetus to think about how to practice Yiddishkeit differently. So let's just give ourselves a thumbnail sketch of everything we spoke about until now. We gave 4 different ways of understanding Yosef's dreams. We have 1, that they're prophetic. 2, that they're a reflection of perhaps an outsized ego. Right. We have Rav Hirsch talking about a future, not a messianic era, but an era when there will be a king, and Yosef declaring himself as leader. And finally here, we have an ideological argument about the role for Yiddishkeit for the Jew who lives in a non-Jewish culture. Dreamers are fine, but they're frequently unrealistic. They're detached from reality. And Yosef's dreams here cause a lot of upheaval. They cause a lot of friction. While the end is happy, there is a harmony that's achieved. There was a lot of strife that happened on the road to achieving that harmony. And perhaps the greatest lesson that we can garner from Yosef is that while dreaming is great, there also has to be effort, wisdom, and focus on how to bring people into that dream without ruffling feathers, to do so in a way that preserves the harmony, the tranquility, and the loving family that was destroyed as a result of Yosef in his youth and his inexperience, sort of running in like a bull in a china shop and not being prepared to approach in a more diplomatic, more political way. And we'll conclude the class here.